Savannah Mitchell, 37, stared at her parents kneeling on her living room floor, their faces streaked with tears. "Please forgive us," her mother begged. But forgiveness was the furthest thing from Savannah's mind, as she recalled how they'd stolen $800,000 from her dead son's trust fund money meant for cancer research to pay for her sister's extravagant wedding. 5 years of planning had led to this moment of reckoning, and Savannah wasn't finished yet. Before I dive deeper into this story about how my family betrayed me in the worst possible way, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If this family revenge drama resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our storytelling community. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how justice finally gets served in this twisted family saga. Losing a child is a wound that never truly heals. For Savannah Mitchell, the death of her 10-year-old son Ethan from a rare form of leukemia left her in a darkness so profound she could barely function. The 3 years of his battle had drained her emotionally, physically, and financially. As a single mother working as a pediatric nurse, Savannah had done everything possible to give Ethan the best care, but in the end, cancer proved merciless. What kept Savannah going in those first few months after Ethan's passing was his final wish. In a moment of clarity during his last week, Ethan had squeezed her hand and whispered, "Mom, I want to help other kids like me." It was this wish that prompted Savannah to establish the Ethan Mitchell Foundation with the $800,000 insurance policy that listed Ethan as the beneficiary. The money was placed in a trust fund with the explicit purpose of funding pediatric cancer research. Savannah's parents, Richard and Margaret Mitchell, had seemed supportive at first. They had helped her organize Ethan's funeral, stayed with her during those first unbearable weeks, and even attended the meeting with the lawyer when she set up the foundation. Richard, a retired financial advisor, had offered to co-manage the trust fund, with her saying it would be one less burden for Savannah to bear while grieving. "You focus on healing, honey," her father had said, patting her hand. "I'll make sure Ethan's money goes exactly where it should." Savannah had been grateful. Her relationship with her parents had always been somewhat strained. They had never approved of her decision to have a child with her college boyfriend, who subsequently abandoned her upon learning of the pregnancy. But Ethan's illness had seemed to soften them, bringing them closer as a family, as they united around his care. Her younger sister Brittany had been less present during Ethan's illness, always busy with her career as a marketing executive in New York and her relationship with James, her boyfriend of 5 years. Savannah had understood not everyone could handle being around a sick child, and Brittany had never been particularly close to Ethan anyway. 6 months after Ethan's death, Savannah had begun to emerge from the fog of grief enough to think about actively launching the foundation's first initiatives. She had connected with Dr. Eleanor Webb, a pioneering researcher in pediatric oncology at Boston Children's Hospital, who was developing a promising new treatment protocol for the type of leukemia that had taken Ethan. "We're making breakthroughs every day," Dr. Webb had told her during their video call. "The kind of funding you're talking about could accelerate our research significantly. It could mean saving children who currently have no options." For the first time since Ethan died, Savannah had felt a spark of purpose. She couldn't save her son, but his legacy could save others. She had called her father that evening, excited to discuss transferring the first $200,000 to Dr. Webb's research program. The long silence on the other end of the line had been her first indication that something was terribly wrong. "Dad, are you there, Savannah, honey? We need to talk." Her father had finally responded, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "Not over the phone. Your mother and I will come over tomorrow." That night, Savannah had barely slept, a sense of foreboding washing over her. The next day, when her parents arrived at her modest 2-bedroom apartment, the grim expressions on their faces confirmed her worst fears even before they spoke a word. Savannah would never forget the way her mother's hands trembled as she placed her teacup on the coffee table that fateful afternoon. Her father sat rigidly beside her mother on the sofa, his jaw clenched so tight that a muscle twitched visibly beneath his salt and pepper beard. "There's been a situation with Ethan's trust fund," Richard began, not quite meeting her eyes. "What kind of situation?" Savannah asked, her voice barely a whisper as panic began to rise in her chest. Her mother interjected, "Brittany and James are getting married in 3 months, dear. We were going to tell you at Sunday dinner next week." Savannah blinked in confusion. What does Brittany's wedding have to do with Ethan's foundation money? The silence that followed was deafening. Her father cleared his throat. "The Harrisons, James's parents, they're very particular. Old money. They expect a certain type of wedding, a statement event." Brittany was worried they might back out of accepting her into their family if the wedding didn't meet their standards. "Dad," Savannah said slowly, the pieces beginning to fall into horrifying place. "What have you done?" "We've temporarily reallocated the funds," he replied, slipping into the detached financial advisor tone he used when discussing difficult monetary decisions. "Just a loan. Brittany will pay it back after the wedding. The Harrisons are giving them a house as a wedding present, and she'll take out a home equity loan to replace the money." Savannah felt as though the room was spinning. "How much?" she demanded. Her parents exchanged glances. "All of it," her mother finally admitted. "It's a destination wedding in the Maldives. Private island. 200 guests. The Harrisons have invited some very influential people, connections that could set Brittany and James up for life. You took all $800,000. Money that was meant for children dying of cancer. Money from my dead son's insurance policy." Savannah's voice rose with each question, her body shaking with rage and disbelief. "Now, don't be melodramatic," her father said, his tone hardening. "Ethan is gone, Savannah. Nothing will bring him back, but this money can secure Brittany's future. She's marrying into one of the most prestigious families in the Northeast. Do you know what that means for all of us?" Savannah stood up, her legs unsteady. "Get out," she whispered. "Savannah, please," her mother pleaded. "We're family. Families help each other. Brittany has a chance at a life you never had, a life you threw away when you got pregnant in college. Don't you want better for your sister?" The casual cruelty of her mother's words struck Savannah like a physical blow. In that moment, she realized that her parents had never truly accepted Ethan. To them, he had been evidence of her failure, a mistake that had derailed her promising future. And now they were using his death to elevate the daughter they had always favored. "My son was not a mistake," Savannah said, her voice deadly calm despite the storm raging inside her. "He was the best thing that ever happened to me. And you stole from him. You stole from sick children who could have been saved with that money. It's only temporary," her father insisted. "And if this researcher's work is as promising as you say, surely a few months' delay won't matter." Savannah walked to her front door and held it open. "Leave now. And tell Brittany I hope every crystal champagne, flute, and every orchid centerpiece at her obscene wedding reminds her that they were paid for with blood money from her dead nephew." After they left, Savannah collapsed onto the floor, consumed by grief all over again. But this time it was mixed with a burning rage that would fuel her for years to come. As she sat there clutching a framed photo of Ethan to her chest, a resolve began to form in her mind. This was not over. She would not allow her son's legacy to be destroyed by her family's betrayal. Somehow, some way, she would make them pay for what they had done. And she would ensure that Ethan's final wish was honored no matter what it took. The next morning, Savannah woke with swollen eyes and a clarity of purpose she hadn't felt since Ethan's diagnosis. Her first call was to attorney Lawrence Devine, who had helped her establish the trust fund. They did what Lawrence's normally composed voice rose in disbelief as Savannah explained the situation. Savannah, that's not just morally reprehensible, it's illegal. Your father may have been a co-trustee, but the terms were explicitly clear. Those funds were designated for the foundation. Can we get the money back? Savannah asked, clutching her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. Lawrence sighed heavily. We can file charges for misappropriation of funds, breach of fiduciary duty, and possibly fraud. But if they've already spent the money on wedding deposits and arrangements, then Brittany's wedding gets canceled, Savannah finished firmly. I don't care if the Queen of England is attending. That money wasn't theirs to take. I'll start the paperwork immediately, Lawrence promised. But Savannah, you should prepare yourself. Legal battles with family are brutal, especially with money involved. And they rarely end quickly. Savannah thanked him and ended the call, already planning her next move. She reached for her laptop and typed out an email to Dr. Webb explaining the devastating situation with as much composure as she could muster. Then she made a decision that would change the course of her life. She called the nursing director at the hospital where she'd worked for the past 12 years and resigned effective immediately. She had accumulated significant savings during Ethan's illness. Money friends and community members had donated to help with his treatment, which insurance hadn't fully covered. She had been saving it for a rainy day, but now she saw a different purpose for it. Within a week, Savannah had rented a small studio apartment near her parents' suburban neighborhood and put her own apartment up for sublet. If she was going to fight this battle, she needed to be close to the enemy camp. She needed to understand exactly what they were doing with Ethan's money. Her plan began with reconnaissance. Each morning, she would park down the street from her parents' Tudor-style home, watching as vendors came and went. Wedding planners, caterers, florists, all parading into the house for meetings with Brittany, who had apparently moved back home temporarily to plan her extravaganza. Savannah started a detailed log noting company names, approximate time spent in consultation, and any deliveries made. She created a spreadsheet estimating costs based on her online research of luxury wedding vendors. The numbers were staggering, confirming her suspicion that every cent of Ethan's money was being poured into this wedding. During one of her surveillance sessions, she spotted James Harrison for the first time, tall, conventionally handsome, with the confident bearing of someone who had never worried about money a day in his life. He arrived in a sleek Maserati, barely glancing at the gardener who was meticulously manicuring her parents' already perfect lawn. Savannah wondered if James knew where his wedding funds were coming from. Was he complicit in this betrayal or merely an unwitting beneficiary? She added his name to her growing investigation board in her Spartan apartment, connecting him with red string to the key players: her parents, Brittany, and the Harrison family. 3 weeks into her surveillance, Savannah received a text message from a number she didn't recognize. "I know what you're doing. We should talk." Attached was a photo of her car parked near her parents' house. The message was from Megan, her parents' housekeeper for the past decade. Savannah had always liked Megan, who had snuck extra cookies to Ethan whenever they visited and sent a beautiful handwritten condolence card after his passing. They met at a coffee shop far from her parents' neighborhood. Megan slid into the booth across from Savannah, her eyes darting nervously around the cafe. "They're talking about restraining orders," Megan said without preamble. "Your father saw you last week. He's convinced you're unstable with grief and might cause a scene that would embarrass them in front of the Harrisons." Savannah gripped her mug tightly. "I haven't approached them once." "I know, but they're paranoid. This wedding, it's all they talk about. Your mother is practically glued to Brittany's side, and your father keeps having hushed phone calls with their bank." Megan hesitated. "Savannah, I overheard something else. Something about a second mortgage on their house." "They mortgaged their house for this wedding too." Savannah was shocked. Her parents had owned their home outright for years. Megan nodded. And there's more. I found documents in your father's home office. They've cashed out their retirement accounts as well. Savannah sat back stunned. That makes no sense. Even with an extravagant wedding, Ethan's money should have been more than enough. Unless Megan said carefully, the wedding isn't the only expense. As you're following this journey of betrayal with me, I'm curious, have you ever experienced a family member breaking your trust? Sometimes the deepest wounds come from those who should protect us most. If you're finding this story compelling, please hit that like button and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Let me continue with how I started uncovering even more shocking truths about what my parents were really doing with my son's money. Savannah spent the next 2 days processing Megan's revelation, pacing the floor of her small rental as she tried to make sense of it all. If the wedding wasn't consuming all of Ethan's money, where was the rest going? Her parents had always been financially conservative, proudly debt-free, for decades. Taking a second mortgage and emptying their retirement accounts was completely out of character. She called Lawrence with this new information. "We've hit a wall with the legal proceedings," he admitted. "Your father is claiming he had verbal permission from you to use the funds for family purposes. It's your word against his, and courts move slowly in these matters." "That's absurd," Savannah fumed. "There were specific documents. You drafted them yourself." "Yes, but your father has submitted an affidavit claiming those were preliminary discussions only, and that the final verbal agreement was more flexible. He's muddying the waters, Savannah, and with his reputation in the community as a respected financial advisor." Savannah knew what Lawrence wasn't saying. Her father was a pillar of the community, a deacon at their church, former president of the Rotary Club. She was a grieving mother who had quit her job and moved into a studio apartment to spy on her family. In a character contest, the court might well favor her father. She needed hard evidence. Her nursing background had taught Savannah the importance of meticulous documentation and patient observation. Now she applied those same skills to investigating her family. She expanded her surveillance to include Brittany and James, following them discreetly when they left her parents' home. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, this vigilance paid off. She watched as Brittany and James emerged from a nondescript office building in the commercial district, Brittany clutching a folder of papers to her chest, while James spoke animatedly on his phone. Savannah noted the address and, after they drove away, approached the building. The directory in the lobby listed various businesses, but one caught her eye: Harrison Capital Ventures Suite 405. A quick internet search revealed Harrison Capital Ventures was a recently established investment firm registered to none other than James Harrison Sr., James's father. Further digging uncovered that the firm specialized in international real estate development, primarily in Southeast Asia. Savannah's pulse quickened. This couldn't be a coincidence. She remembered a conversation with her father years ago when he had lamented missing out on an investment opportunity in Vietnam. "The real money's in emerging markets," he had said. "But you need significant capital to get in the door, at least $500,000. By the time average investors like me can afford to participate, the biggest profits have already been made." The pieces were starting to fit together. What if the wedding was only part of the scheme? What if her parents had struck a deal with the Harrisons' Ethan's money in exchange for a piece of some investment opportunity? Savannah needed to confirm her suspicions. She reached out to Megan again. "I need access to their home office," she said when they met. "Just once, when everyone is out." Megan hesitated. "They're all attending a wedding rehearsal dinner this Friday evening. I'm supposed to be there to help serve, but I could call in sick." "That would be perfect," Savannah said, squeezing Megan's hand gratefully. "I'll never forget this, Megan. I loved Ethan," Megan replied simply. "He deserved better than this." Friday evening found Savannah slipping through her parents' back door using the spare key Megan had provided. The house was eerily quiet, filled with the ghosts of family dinners and holiday gatherings that now seemed like elaborate facades. In her father's office, Savannah went straight to his computer. The password was predictably unchanged, Brittany's birthday followed by her middle initial. Inside, she found folders meticulously organized as her father had always kept his digital life. One folder labeled HCV Investment contained everything she needed. Emails between her father and James Harrison Sr., discussing a unique opportunity in the Vietnamese resort market. A partnership agreement showing Richard Mitchell investing $500 0 inches exchange for a 10% stake in a development called Sapphire Bay Luxury Villas. Most damning of all, a transaction record showing the transfer of funds from Ethan's trust account directly to Harrison Capital Ventures. Savannah photographed everything, her hands shaking with rage. Not only had they stolen from Ethan for Brittany's wedding, but they'd also used the majority of his money to fund her father's get-rich-quick scheme with the Harrisons. The betrayal was even deeper than she had imagined. As she was about to leave, something else caught her eye. A small safe in the corner of the office, partially hidden behind a decorative plant. Her father had always kept important documents in a safe, and Savannah remembered the combination her mother's birthday. Inside were more paper documents, financial statements, property deeds, and a thick envelope marked Brittany Wedding. Savannah opened it and gasped. Inside were photos of an elaborate beachfront villa along with a deed of ownership and a handwritten note from her father to Brittany, "Your wedding present from us and the Harrisons. A slice of paradise to start your new life." They weren't just funding an investment. They were using Ethan's money to buy Brittany and James a vacation home as a wedding gift, likely through this development deal with Harrison Sr. The extravagant wedding was just the beginning of the lavish spending of her son's legacy. As Savannah carefully replaced everything and prepared to leave, she heard a car in the driveway. Peering cautiously through the blinds, she saw Brittany exiting a taxi, apparently having returned early from the rehearsal dinner. Trapped in the house with her sister, Savannah's heart pounded as she heard the front door open. This confrontation wasn't part of her plan, but perhaps it was inevitable. As footsteps approached the office, Savannah took a deep breath and prepared for the storm that was about to break. Wow, I can feel my heart racing just remembering this moment. I almost got caught red-handed in my parents' house while uncovering their scheme. Have you ever had a close call that made your adrenaline spike? Before I tell you what happened when my sister walked in, hit that subscribe button if you're invested in this story. I promise the confrontation that followed changed everything, and you won't want to miss how this family drama continues to unfold. The office door swung open and Brittany stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes widening at the sight of Savannah. "What the hell are you doing here?" Brittany demanded, her voice shrill with surprise. Savannah straightened up, no longer bothering to hide what she'd been doing. "Finding proof of what you've all been up to with Ethan's money." Brittany's face flushed, a mix of guilt and defiance washing over her features. "You need to leave, now. Before I call the police." "Go ahead," Savannah challenged, holding up her phone. "I've already documented everything. The transfers from Ethan's trust fund, the investment with Harrison Capital Ventures, the beachfront villa that's supposedly your wedding gift. Did you know that's where my son's legacy went?" "Brittany, to buy you a vacation home," Brittany crossed her arms defensively. "You don't understand how these things work. It's a smart investment. The property will appreciate in value." "That money was for pediatric cancer research," Savannah said, her voice breaking. "For children who are dying the same way Ethan died. How could you be part of this?" For a moment, Brittany's composure faltered. "It wasn't my idea, okay? Dad and James's father cooked this up together. The Harrisons wanted proof that our family had the right connections and resources before accepting me. And you went along with it. You knew where the money was coming from." Brittany looked away. "I didn't ask for details. Dad said he'd handle it." "Convenient," Savannah spat. "Just close your eyes and enjoy your blood money." "It's not like that." Brittany's voice rose. The investment will pay off. Dad says we'll be able to triple the money within 5 years. Then we can pay it all back to your precious foundation and still have profit left over. Savannah laughed bitterly. And how many children will die waiting for research that never came because you all decided to gamble with Ethan's money? Do you think their parents will be comforted knowing that someday, maybe, if your luxury real estate venture doesn't fail, their children's deaths might not have been in vain? Tears welled in Brittany's eyes. I never meant to hurt you, Savannah. I loved Ethan. No, Savannah said quietly. You didn't. None of you did. If you had, you could never have done this. A heavy silence fell between the sisters, broken only by the distant sound of another car pulling into the driveway. That'll be Mom and Dad, Brittany said, wiping her eyes hastily. Please, Savannah, just go. We can talk about this another time. But Savannah stood her ground. No more hiding. No more secrets. It's time everyone faced what they've done. Minutes later, Richard and Margaret Mitchell walked into a scene they clearly hadn't expected. Their 2 daughters in Richard's office, one tear-stained, the other radiating cold fury. Savannah, her father said carefully. This is a surprise. I imagine it is, Savannah replied. I know everything, Dad. The investment with Harrison Sr., the villa, all of it. Richard's expression hardened. You broke into our house, went through private documents. Don't you dare take the moral high ground, Savannah fired back. You stole from your dead grandson. You violated a legal trust. You betrayed everything Ethan stood for. We were trying to create a financial opportunity for the whole family. Her mother interjected. Richard and Mr. Harrison have a brilliant plan. The return on investment will... Stop it, Savannah shouted, her control finally breaking. Just stop with the justifications. You didn't do this for me or for Ethan. You did it for yourselves, for your precious social standing with the Harrisons, for Brittany's picture-perfect life. Her father stepped toward her. You're too emotional to understand. Business requires risk. Opportunity. Children are dying. Savannah cut him off. Real children like Ethan. While you're risking his money on some property development scheme, Dr. Webb's research is stalled. Treatments that could save lives aren't being developed. That's the reality you've all been so eager to ignore. A heavy silence fell over the room. In that moment, looking at her family's faces, her father's stubborn pride, her mother's uncomfortable guilt, Brittany's tear-streaked confusion, Savannah realized she would never receive the acknowledgement or remorse. She saw it. I'm taking this to court, she said finally. All of it. The misappropriation of funds, the investment scheme, everything. I've documented it all. You'd destroy this family, her mother asked aghast. Right before Brittany's wedding, create a public scandal that would ruin all of us. You destroyed this family when you decided Ethan's life and legacy were worth sacrificing, Savannah replied. I'm just making it official. As she moved toward the door, her father called after her, Think carefully, Savannah. The Harrisons are powerful people with expensive lawyers. This won't end well for you. Savannah turned back one last time. It already hasn't ended well for me, Dad. My son is dead and my family betrayed everything he stood for. The only thing left is justice, and I intend to get it no matter how long it takes. She left them standing there, her head held high despite the tears streaming down her face. In her car, the weight of what lay ahead settled heavily on her shoulders. The legal battle would be brutal and prolonged. The Mitchells versus the Mitchells, with the wealthy Harrisons undoubtedly backing her parents and sister. But as she drove away from the house where she'd grown up, Savannah felt a strange sense of liberation. The truth was out. There would be no more pretense, no more family dinners where they all avoided mentioning Ethan or the foundation. The battle lines were drawn, and Savannah was prepared for war. What she couldn't know then was just how far that war would escalate or how dramatically the tables would turn over the next 5 years. The confrontation in her father's office was only the beginning of a journey that would test her resolve, challenge her ethics, and ultimately lead to that moment in her living room with her parents kneeling before her begging for forgiveness. The legal battle began exactly as Lawrence had warned, slowly, painfully, and with no clear path to victory. The Harrisons, as Savannah had expected, immediately aligned themselves with her parents and Brittany, providing a team of corporate lawyers that made Lawrence look hopelessly outmatched. The first hearing was particularly brutal. The opposition painted Savannah as an unstable, grief-stricken mother who had given verbal permission for her father to manage the funds as he saw fit. They produced character witnesses, family friends, church members, even Savannah's former supervisor from the hospital, who testified to Richard Mitchell's sterling reputation and Savannah's emotional fragility since Ethan's death. This is a family matter that should never have reached the courts, the Harrisons' lead attorney stated smoothly. A misunderstanding inflamed by understandable but misplaced grief. Despite the evidence Savannah had gathered, the judge seemed reluctant to move quickly against such upstanding community members as the Mitchells and Harrisons. The case stalled in preliminary hearings for months. Meanwhile, Brittany's wedding proceeded as planned. Savannah received no invitation, though she saw the photos that flooded social media. Her sister, in a designer gown that reportedly cost $50,000, exchanging vows on a private beach as the sun set over the Indian Ocean. The wedding made the society pages of several newspapers, described as the union of two distinguished families and the social event of the season. 2 months after the wedding, Savannah received her first anonymous envelope. Inside was a USB drive containing financial documents showing that Harrison Capital Ventures was under investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission for potential irregularities in their foreign investment practices. The note attached simply read, "Not everyone at Harrison Sr.'s firm agrees with his methods. Keep fighting." This unexpected ally, someone inside Harrison Capital Ventures with access to confidential information, changed everything. Over the next year, more envelopes arrived, each containing damning evidence, questionable permits for the Vietnamese development, potential bribery of local officials, misleading statements to investors. Savannah passed everything to Lawrence, who brought in a former SEC prosecutor as co-counsel. The focus of their case shifted from simply recovering Ethan's money to exposing a potentially fraudulent investment scheme that had entangled her parents. "This is bigger than your family now," the new lawyer Diane Matsuda told Savannah. "If what these documents suggest is true, Harrison Capital Ventures could be operating a sophisticated fraud that's affected multiple investors." Savannah felt a grim satisfaction. If she couldn't recover Ethan's money directly, perhaps she could still ensure that those who took it faced consequences. The investigation progressed quietly for another year. Savannah returned to nursing, taking a position at a different hospital in the pediatric oncology ward. The work was emotionally challenging but gave her purpose. Each child she cared for strengthened her resolve to see justice done for Ethan. Then came the market crash of 2022. Stock markets plummeted worldwide, but the real estate market in Southeast Asia was particularly hard hit. Property values in Vietnam collapsed virtually overnight. Savannah's anonymous source sent one more package: internal documents from Harrison Capital Ventures, showing that the Sapphire Bay development was effectively bankrupt. Not only was Ethan's money gone, but her parents had lost their home equity and retirement savings as well. The news should have brought Savannah satisfaction. Wasn't this karma, her parents losing everything after what they'd done? But instead she felt a hollow ache. Their punishment had come from market forces, not justice. They might be financially ruined, but they still hadn't acknowledged the moral wrong they'd committed. Then came a breakthrough in her legal case. Diane Matsuda called with news that the SEC had formally opened an investigation into Harrison Capital Ventures based partly on evidence they had submitted. They've subpoenaed all the company's records, Diane explained, including all documentation related to investors in the Sapphire Bay project. 3 months later, James Harrison Sr. was indicted on multiple charges of securities fraud, wire fraud, and bribery. The scandal exploded across financial news outlets with particular attention paid to the allegation that he had knowingly accepted and misused funds from a pediatric cancer foundation. The Harrisons' carefully constructed social facade crumbled overnight. James Jr., Brittany's husband, was not directly implicated, but resigned from his executive position at his family's main business. The luxury villa in Vietnam was seized by creditors. It was vindication of a sort, but still not the justice Savannah truly sought. The criminal case against Harrison Sr. would likely end in a plea deal. Her parents would face financial ruin but no legal consequences for their specific betrayal of Ethan's trust. Then, unexpectedly, Dr. Eleanor Webb contacted Savannah. "I've received a substantial anonymous donation," she said. $800,000 designated specifically for our leukemia research protocol. The donor requested it be administered through the Ethan Mitchell Foundation. Savannah was stunned. "Anonymous? You have no idea who sent it." The donation came through a law firm that specializes in discretionary trusts. They were quite clear their client wishes to remain unnamed. After hanging up, Savannah sat in bewildered silence. Who would make such a specific donation? Not her parents, they had lost everything in the investment collapse. Not the Harrisons, who were facing legal troubles of their own. Brittany and James had recently listed their New York apartment for sale, apparently facing financial difficulties after James lost his position. The mystery remained unsolved for several weeks until Savannah received a letter with no return address. Inside was a simple note card with a familiar handwriting, Megan's. "Some debts can only be repaid by those who incurred them. Others must be settled by those who recognize the true cost of what was lost. Your father once told me to invest in what I believe in. I believe in Ethan's wish." Savannah read the card multiple times before understanding dawned. Megan, her parents' housekeeper of over a decade, had somehow accumulated enough wealth to replace Ethan's stolen money. But how? The answer came during a chance encounter at a coffee shop. A former neighbor mentioned seeing a story in a business magazine about successful early investors in a tech startup that had recently gone public. One of the profiles was about a household employee who convinced several wealthy families she worked for to let her invest their holiday bonuses in the company. Made millions when it took off. "I'm pretty sure it was your parents' housekeeper, though. They called her M. Sullivan in the article." Megan had been quietly building her own fortune while working for wealthy families like the Mitchells, and she had chosen to use part of it to restore what they had stolen. The donation allowed Dr. Webb's research to move forward, fulfilling Ethan's final wish despite the Mitchells' betrayal. It was a form of justice Savannah hadn't anticipated, not punishment for the guilty, but restoration of what had been lost. Yet something still felt unfinished. Her parents had never acknowledged what they'd done. There had been no accountability, no moment of reckoning. The lawsuit continued to inch forward, but even if Savannah eventually won a judgment against them, their financial ruin meant any victory would be symbolic at best. 3 more years passed. The Ethan Mitchell Foundation, revived by Megan's generous donation, became a significant funding source for Dr. Webb's research. Savannah took a position on the foundation's board while continuing her work as a nurse. Slowly, the raw wound of betrayal began to heal, though she maintained no contact with her family. Then came the call that would lead to that final confrontation in her living room. "Savannah, it's Lawrence. We've received a settlement offer." Savannah frowned, cradling the phone against her shoulder as she sorted through patient files at her desk. 5 years of legal battles had made her wary of sudden developments. What kind of settlement? "There's no money left to recover." "It's not about money," Lawrence replied. Your parents want to meet with you. In person. To formally acknowledge their wrongdoing and issue a public apology. They're prepared to sign a legally binding statement admitting to misappropriation of the trust funds. Savannah's hand stilled. Why now? After all this time, I'm not sure, Lawrence admitted. The request came through their new attorney. Apparently, they've been in therapy. They mentioned something about making amends before it's too late. Later that evening, Savannah sat in her apartment, a different one from where she'd started this journey, larger and brighter, with Ethan's photos prominently displayed considering the offer. A legal admission of guilt would bring closure to the case that had consumed 5 years of her life. But could any apology truly make amends for what they'd done? Curiosity, if nothing else, made her agree to the meeting. But she set her own terms. It would happen at her apartment, on her territory. She would hear what they had to say, but made no promises of forgiveness. The day of the meeting arrived with a strange sense of inevitability. Savannah had imagined this moment countless times over the years, but the reality of seeing her parents again after so long was still jarring. They looked older, diminished somehow. Her father's confident posture was gone, replaced by a slight stoop. Her mother's carefully maintained appearance had given way to gray roots and minimal makeup. They stood awkwardly in her living room, neither meeting her eyes at first. "Thank you for agreeing to see us," her father finally said, his voice rougher than she remembered. Savannah gestured to the sofa. "You wanted to talk, so talk." Instead, her father did something that shocked her. He lowered himself to his knees on her living room floor. After a moment's hesitation, her mother joined him. "What are you doing?" Savannah asked, startled by the gesture. "In the therapy group we've been attending," her mother explained. "We learned about making meaningful amends. Words aren't enough." The gesture of kneeling symbolizes humbling oneself before the person who was wronged. "Please forgive us," her father said, his voice breaking. "What we did was unforgivable. We betrayed Ethan. We betrayed you. We put status and money above our own grandson's legacy." Tears streamed down her mother's face. "We've lost everything, Savannah. Our home, our savings, our standing in the community. But nothing hurts more than losing you and knowing what we did to Ethan's memory." Savannah stood perfectly still, absorbing the sight of her parents kneeling before her. She had imagined this moment so differently: satisfaction, vindication, perhaps even gloating. Instead, she felt a complex mix of emotions, lingering anger, yes, but also a profound sadness for all that had been destroyed. "Where's Brittany?" she asked. Her parents exchanged glances. "She and James divorced last year," her father replied. "After everything collapsed, she's moved to Seattle trying to start over. She wanted to come today, but we thought it should be just us first." "She was part of this too," Savannah said. She was, her mother acknowledged. "But we were the ones who set it all in motion. We were the parents. We should have known better." There was a long silence. Savannah walked to the window, looking out at the street below as she gathered her thoughts. "Do you know what happened with Ethan's foundation?" she asked finally. Her parents shook their heads. "An anonymous donor replaced the entire amount you stole, every penny." Dr. Webb's research has made significant progress. 3 children who would have died from the same cancer that took Ethan are alive today because of new treatment protocols the foundation helped fund. Fresh tears filled her mother's eyes. That's wonderful. Ethan would be so proud." "No thanks to you," Savannah said, but the words held less bite than they once would have. Her father bowed his head. "We can never undo what we did. But we needed you to know that we understand now. The full weight of it. Not just the money, but the betrayal of trust. The betrayal of Ethan." "Why did you do it?" Savannah asked the question that had haunted her for 5 years, really. Not the excuses about investments and Brittany's future. The truth. Her father sighed deeply. Because we were ashamed, he admitted. Ashamed that we hadn't been better grandparents to Ethan. Ashamed that we judged you for having him. When he died, it was easier to push forward with something new, Brittany's perfect life, a business opportunity, than to face our own failures. We told ourselves we were creating a legacy, but we were really running from one. It was the first honest answer they'd ever given her, and Savannah felt something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, she said, honestly. What you did goes beyond betrayal. You took the worst moment of my life, losing my son, and made it about yourselves. We know, her mother whispered. We don't expect forgiveness, we just needed to tell you the truth. To take responsibility finally. Savannah looked at her parents still kneeling on her floor. 5 years ago, she had dreamed of making them kneel before her, of forcing them to acknowledge what they'd done. Now that the moment had arrived, she found it brought her less satisfaction than she'd imagined. Get up, she said finally. Kneeling won't fix anything. They rose slowly, uncertainty in their expressions. I'll sign off on the settlement, Savannah continued. The formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing, the public apology. Not for you, but for Ethan. So there's an official record of what happened to his legacy and how it was restored despite your actions. Thank you, her father said quietly. Savannah shook her head. I'm not doing it for your peace of mind. I'm doing it for closure. So I can finally put this chapter behind me and focus entirely on the foundation's work. Her mother reached out hesitantly, then pulled her hand back. Could we? Would it ever be possible to have some kind of relationship again? Not like before, but something Savannah considered the question carefully. The easy answer would be no, a complete rejection that would punish them further. But she thought of Ethan, of his capacity for forgiveness, even during the worst of his illness. I don't know, she answered truthfully. I'm not ready for that now. Maybe someday, but I can't promise anything. They nodded, accepting her terms. As they prepared to leave, her father turned back one last time. For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've done with the foundation. Continuing Ethan's legacy despite everything, he would be proud of you too. After they left, Savannah sat alone in her apartment, feeling strangely hollow. The confrontation she had built up in her mind for years had finally happened, but it hadn't brought the sense of triumph she'd expected. Instead, she felt something else, a weary recognition that some wounds never fully heal, but perhaps they could eventually scar over. She walked to Ethan's photo on her mantel, touching his smiling face gently. It was never about making them kneel, was it? She whispered to him. It was about making sure you weren't forgotten. In the end, that was the true victory. Not the legal battle, not seeing her once proud parents humbled before her, but knowing that Ethan's wish was being fulfilled. Children were being helped, lives were being saved. His legacy lived on stronger than the betrayal that had nearly destroyed it. Savannah picked up her phone and pulled up Dr. Webb's most recent email photos of a young girl who had successfully completed the new treatment protocol the foundation had helped fund. The child was smiling broadly, holding a sign that read "Cancer-free." This was Ethan's true legacy. Not money in a trust fund, not legal battles or family reckonings, but hope for children fighting the same battle he had fought. As Savannah set down the phone, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. The journey wasn't over. There would be more work to do for the foundation, more children to help, perhaps even a long road of cautious reconciliation with her family. But for the first time, she felt ready to walk that path wherever it might lead. I hope my story resonates with those of you who've experienced family betrayal or had to fight for justice after a devastating loss. Have you ever had to stand up for what's right even against your own family? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story of family karma and eventual reckoning touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about finding strength through life's hardest moments. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that justice, while slow, does eventually come. Thank you all for listening to my journey of loss, betrayal, and ultimately finding purpose through preserving my son's legacy. I'm grateful for this community where we can share our most difficult moments and find understanding.